Welcome to Black Men Speak. I'm your co-host, J.R. Stewart.
And I'm Tommy Duncan.
And today we're discussing a Prager University YouTube video on the top 5 reasons. What was the top 5 reasons?
Top 5 problems in the black community.
Top 5 problems in the black community, okay. I believe it was done by the guy Raleigh, who wrote the, I can't think of the book. We covered it in the book club a couple of years ago. But anyway, I'll find it and maybe post a link to it. So let's get started. You want to do a quick review of what his top 5 was, and then we'll start a discussion based on from 5 and then working our way down to 1. Now we may not get through all 5 of them today, and if we don't, then we'll make this a 2-part series and cover the 5, 4, and 3 possibly today, and then 2 and 1 on the next show. So Tom, why don't you give us a recap of what the top 5 problems in the black community was according to this Prager University video.
So the top 5 problems in the black community were victimology, otherwise always blaming someone else, or someone's always responsible for all the problems that are going on. Then there is the lack of diversity. And when we say lack of diversity, we mean lack of diversity of thought. And his analysis was skewing towards more liberal ideas, but really not a broad brushstroke across conservative, moderate, and or conservative thought. Then there's 3, black on black violence. Obviously the high volume of homicide within the black community, especially in large urban areas. The proliferation of baby mamas. That means a lot of black women who are raising kids by themselves. And then the number 1 is the unquestioned allegiance to progressive policies. And I guess his inference there was steering towards ultra-liberal policies without any critical analysis of thought.
Okay. Now let's start with number 5. What was number 5 again?
Victimology.
Victimology. Oh man, that's interesting because if you look at the current administration, the Trump administration, Trump has become quite well at turning his supporters into victims. You notice on his speeches, everywhere, just about everywhere he goes, he's blaming someone else for the problems of America. It's the Chinese with the trade deficit, it's Mexico with NAFTA, it's Canada with NAFTA, it's immigration, illegal immigration, taking jobs away from Americans. Issue after issue after, always Democrats not wanting to work with him and get things fixed. But he has taken that whole victim playbook and used it to his advantage. At some point, everybody in America is going to be a victim. You know, or be in some class of victimhood, or be able to claim some victim status, because it seems like that just seems to be the way that people are aligning their support on who's victimizing you.
Yeah, it is kind of basically what got him in office and what is keeping him very strong with his base.
Yes.
Only issue with that is that I guess it, to me, kind of keeps people confused because it's kind of teetering from one place to another. And I guess if we talk about some of the issues in our community, if you continue to blame other folks on your problems, you never really get to the point where you're solving your problem.
Not sure you can't, because in order to solve the problem, you first have to accept responsibility for it. So if you look at those 12-step programs from NA or AA or any of those A's out there, and with the self-help and recovery process, it seems like they all start with the first step, which is accepting responsibility for your situation. And you can't fix something until you accept responsibility for it. So if you're a victim and blaming someone else, then you'll forever be lost.
But this is what we have to consider. I mean, most folks, well, black folks in particular, let's say African Americans, not particularly Caribbean Americans or Africans in America, but if we look at African Americans, and not everyone, but a large segment, okay, they look at slavery, right, which is valid. They look at oppression, what some consider to be white supremacy, and using the political power that folks who don't look like them, who run the government and control most of the means of wealth and equity, use that to keep black folks back. So I guess my question would be, there is some validity if you consider the fact that you're not in a position of control, yet at the same time, you have to figure out the source of the problem, but at some point you have to take some responsibility in solving it.
Sure, that is sure. I mean, you did point out a very good point there when you talked about Caribbean blacks, or the blacks from, let's say, from Africa, Nigeria, who migrate to America, do not seem to have the same victim mentality that some American blacks do. Now, we tend to point out to the civil rights movement, racism, and chiefly slavery, but in the Caribbean there was slavery also, and there's racism there, maybe not to the same extent that it was here in America, but they come out of an environment where there were some of the conditions were similar, but yet they come to America and they seem to have more of a let's get it done attitude than we do, and we've been here.
Yeah, well, I mean, you're right. You bring up a very good point. The difference is in some of these Caribbean countries, a lot of these Caribbean countries are controlled by Caribbean Americans, black folks.
Black folks, yeah.
And so they're in a position where they have power and influence over the government, unlike African Americans in the United States of America or in some of the African countries. I mean, some of the African countries, obviously, they're run by Native Africans, yet they are still somewhat colonized by some of the European countries.
Sure.
So ultimately, you can say that you have a person that looks like you in office in the Caribbean countries and or the African countries. Some of them are colonized, some of them are not, and so there is a sense of cohesiveness because you have folks who are running the government in addition to the folks who are working, in addition to obviously those who are poor. And so I think that generates a different mindset than folks when you're primarily a part of what you consider to be an oppressed class.
Well, I think as it relates to black folks here in America, there tends to be a message definitely from the left, that it's not your fault. You hear that constantly in there. The description of what's going on is that, oh, well, you know, if you live in a poor area, well, it's not your fault. You know, it's the conditions there. The government didn't do this. The schools are very bad. Others are not paying enough into the system to help lift you out of your problem. And the reality is if you buy into that whole victim message, thinking that it really is someone else's problem, it's not your fault, then there will never ever be the desire, the impetus to push you forward, for you to do something about it. And the reality is that if the government could solve all your problems, we spent several $1 trillion in the war on poverty since the 60s, and we still have about 15–20% poverty rate in America. So it really had to be one iota of difference before or after you make the comparison as a percentage of our population. So let's just assume that regardless of what the government do, is baked into the formula that 15–20% of the American population is going to be poor. Period. No matter how you rank poverty, how you classify it, there's always going to be an underclass. There's always going to be a middle class. There's always going to be an upper class. And you need a large underclass in order to have a middle class. You need a middle class in order to have a smaller upper class. Unfortunately, we're not going to have a whole population of upper class. And even if everyone in America was quote-unquote rich by the world stage, which a lot of people do consider all of America to be rich, even among that, you're going to still have people who are at the bottom, people in the middle, and people at the top. No matter how much wealth we have or how little wealth we have, that's just the way the formula is going to work out regardless. So with that being said, if you're waiting for the government to uplift you out of poverty, it's not going to happen.
No, I would agree with you there. I think that part of the thesis of victimology is those folks who spend the majority of their time being victims ultimately stay victims.
Yes, they do.
And if we look at poverty,
some call professional victims.
There you go. Those who are, whether it's those who are oppressed, those who are suffering. I guess there are folks who are, by their sheer grit or circumstances, sometimes they're chosen, they're able to get above their circumstances. But at the end of the day, if you spend the majority of your time considering and or discussing yourself as being a victim, it's going to be very difficult to get yourself out of that situation.
And you know, the formula to get yourself out of that situation in America is simple. Either work harder to sell the skills that you have, which is really your time, or you work smarter, which means you go to school, you get an education, you get some information and knowledge that's valuable to someone else, and you sell that. So if you're not willing to work very hard, I mean, I know people in my family, most of them were poor, but they work hard. They have a few things now, but they work very hard for the few things they have. They're able to put their kids through school. Now the kids work very hard also, but they work a lot smarter than their parents. They don't have to work as hard physically, but they have college degrees, they have masters, they have law degrees. they're going on to do other things where they sell their skills and knowledge as opposed to their physical strength. So in America, it's either one or the other. If you're poor, you're either going to work your way out of poverty through hard work, or you're going to work your way out of poverty by going to school. And that's a simple formula that seems to work. It doesn't really involve that much government intervention unless you need help just getting into school.
Good point. Question being, if you have a majority of folks who feel that they've been oppressed by the government, who feel that they've been oppressed by other racial groups, and the majority of them are in larger urban areas that have poor school districts, that are underfunded.
Yes.
I mean, we can look at that here in Dallas, and or in rural areas, and typically, regardless of where you are, there's the black schools and there's the white schools.
Sure.
And typically the schools that are in the either poor rural areas or poor urban areas, some of those being predominantly black, they're underfunded. They receive, I mean, statistically less money from the state than other schools. So how do you work yourself out of that situation if you're going to school that gets less money, books are out of date, obviously they're not able to pay teachers, so they can't get the better teachers. So collectively, how do you get your heads wrapped around that if the majority of the kids who are going in that school from that community are going to poor schools, if it comes right down to education and or hard work, and the folks who are supplying the jobs and the upward mobility don't look like it?
Sure. That's a very good question. And I think here in Texas, they tried to solve that with Robin Hood. So we've spent billions of dollars taken away from richer school districts to redistricting to poor school districts. And the end result is that after 20 plus years of Robin Hood, is that the results are pretty much the same. They haven't changed very much. Poor school districts who now receive an influx of cash, it's not how much money they have, it's what they do with the money. And a lot of times, underperforming school districts don't manage their money very well. And so as a result, they waste a great deal of money. You still hear stories about how much money is wasted in DISD. But I don't know if DISD gets as a receiver of money from Robin Hood, but things like Wilma Hutchins, for instance, I think, which has been taken over by DISD. We know all the corruption that existed down there, the mismanagement of money. It probably still exists, even with the state taking it over and DISD taking it over. So, but despite all of the uphill battle, I'm not saying it's easy. If you're poor, it is not easy to work your way out of poverty. It is not. So take whatever government assistance you can get that helps. But on top of that, put a plan together to get out of poverty. If you're not going to do it, then at least put it in your offspring, your children, and give them the motivation and desire not to be poor, so you don't repeat the cycle. It doesn't feed on itself. Let it stop with you, and encourage your children to be better than you, to produce more than you. Like, for instance, I'll probably earn more in my lifetime than both my parents combined by 5 times. And that's not saying, my mother has 2 graduate degrees. My father was a drug dealer, went to prison, came out, became a small business owner. Quite successful at times. But no matter how much money they earn, I'll still earn more than them, and it would be sad if my offspring don't earn more than me. So we have to keep the ladder of progression moving forward. But on top of that, we need to, I think we're going to run a little long on this segment. So let's jump into the next talking point. What was number 4 on the list?
Number 4, lack of diversity.
Lack of diversity, okay.
Sounds kind of strange.
It does sound a little strange. Diversity in thought, though, I think is what he's
diversity in thought.
And basically, this is a serious problem in town. Within somewhere during my high school years, formative years, I encountered some PBS clips of Ronald Reagan, and the thing I enjoyed about listening to his tapes and speeches is that he communicated in a way that an 8th or 9th grader could understand. People said that was his secret, that he spoke in 8th grade level. I was in 8th grade by the time I discovered Ronald Reagan, and then every weekend I would turn to PBS hoping that they would play some of his speeches. And some of the things that he said made sense, because that was a time when I was convinced that the adults were keeping secrets from the young people, because there were things I wanted to know about politics, about life, that they weren't sharing with me. They, pretty, mum's a word. They kept it basic and simple, that white people are evil, black people are good, Republicans are bad, Democrats want to help people. That's all I heard about politics growing up, and So it wasn't until Ronald Reagan came along and began to explain things, break things down, that I began to learn the difference between conservative Republicans, or conservatives and liberals, and then Republicans and Democrats as an ideology. But I also soon discovered that in the black community, it is not widely accepted for you to have a different thought. So if you're a Republican or you're ultra-conservative such as myself, you're often attacked, because people say crazy things like, I can't believe that you're a Republican, as if you're now selling us out. You've now betrayed us, blacklist, by becoming a Republican. So I think, this is a serious issue for us. We should be okay with allowing diversity of thought in our conversations. These are things we need to talk about. We need to discuss and share with each other. We can't just be locked into one box with one answer and one solution is all we know.
No, I agree with you on that. And I think, interestingly enough, before the 1960s, of course, in the era of Kennedy, blacks were predominantly Republican because the Republican Party was the party of Lincoln, of course, emancipated the slaves. And so, when you had that switch during the era of Kennedy, then
even up to Nixon, about 40% of blacks voted for Nixon. So there was still a very large segment of the population, black population, still in the Republican corner. But I think after Nixon, I don't know if it was just a scandal or the war on poverty programs that Johnson put in place that pretty much turned the corner. Right. But the corner has been turned, and we've been in that liberal Democrat box for a very long time now. And interestingly enough, like for instance, at our book club discussion, there's going to be a shameful plug for Eyes of the Soul book club in Dallas. If you're in the DFW area and you're looking for a book club, go check out eyesofthesoul.com. It's a great book club. Anyway, back to it was surprising to hear the number of people speaking in a very conservative manner at the book club. These are all black people. So I think when you talk to black people about what they believe, a lot of their beliefs are rooted in the conservative movement, except they vote for the Democratic Party, even though that party does not really align itself with the best wishes of black people a lot of times, and it certainly doesn't agree with our thoughts. We're generally not that big about gay rights. I think we're becoming more accepting of it. We're pretty strong on immigration. The party is pretty weak on immigration. We're pretty strong on crime. All the things that we believe in education. We want to educate our kids. We have some of the worst performing schools, and we don't seem to push the party, the Democratic Party, to do more to fix the schools. We're far too accepting of problems in our community, and we don't put enough voice to it. And things we lend voice to are not things that are benefiting us. Lending voice to the immigration problem may help immigrants who are trying to come into America, but it doesn't fix our schools. It doesn't create jobs. It doesn't fix the roads. It doesn't do anything about infrastructure or jobs, things that are very much needed in the black community.
Yeah, no, I mean, you have some very good points there. I guess, the challenge that you're dealing with, though, is that, good, bad, or indifferent, when you look at the Democratic Party, however flawed their strategies may be at time, they do speak directly to some of the issues and the challenges that are going on in the black community. And the Republican Party over the last, several decades just have not spoken directly to the black community or some of the issues that they have. And so as a result, however flawed the voting strategy may be within our churches, within our communities, it just doesn't seem on the conservative side, generally speaking, to address directly the things that are the concerns of folks within the black community. And so as a result, they feel that they are neglected.
They are, and you're right about that. The Republican Party for far too long has simply not competed for the black vote, just conceded to the Democratic Party, thinking that there's nothing that they could say or do to win that vote over. I think hopefully that's starting to change a little bit, because we really need both parties competing, listening to the concerns of the black community, and both fighting to do something to win the vote. So giving our vote to one party, ignoring the other party is not the strategy. It doesn't work for us, because in the end, it leaves us with one party thinking that we have this in the bag, the other party thinking we can't compete for it, and in the end, we get nothing.
Right.
So.
No, I completely agree with that. And I guess what has to happen, I don't know that there's particularly a wrong or right when you look at the alignment of thinking, whether that's far left or far right. It's going to really depend on what part of the community you're living in, whether you're wealthy, whether you're poor, what your politics and that type of thing are. But I think the most important thing is there has to be a key set of issues that cross the divide, regardless of what class, regardless of how much money you have, whether you're talking Democrat or Republican. The biggest challenge
is infrastructure, education, not to cut you off, but infrastructure, education, crime, all things that, regardless of what side of the aisle you're on, we can agree on.
Yeah, I mean, but when you talk about crime, what specifically about crime when we talk about infrastructure, what do we mean? I mean, things that are, I guess, of most concern in our community, we have to speak more specifically to that. Otherwise, most folks within our community don't believe that you're talking to us.
Right. So you had a very good point there. So hopefully, ideally, if we get to a point where we can split our vote half and half, that would be the best situation. That truly would mean both parties would have to get out there and fight for our vote, and not just necessarily assume that we're going to vote for the Democrats simply because that's what blacks do, and it will give Republicans a belief that, yeah, I can go out there and compete for it, but I have to put in the work. I have to go, listen to what they have to say, get involved with some of the organization, be at the ground level, when things are being discussed, and be part of the conversation, so that way I can be part of the solution. So, with the time remaining in this segment, what's number 3 on the list?
Black on black violence.
Oh boy, that's a tough one.
Yeah.
Because that is a serious crime, and I joke about it sometimes, and it's really not. And I only joke about it to cover up how severe the problem is. But the black on black crime is outrageous. I mean, we're looking at 52% of the murders now in America being committed by black people, and 95% of black people are murdered by black people. So a good chunk of that, half the murders in America being committed, most of those are being committed by black people against other black people. And this is, I mean, you look at what goes on in Chicago and cities like Baltimore and New Orleans and places in Oakland and Compton and in California, the parts of LA, not so much here in Dallas, but other areas of the country where the black on black crime has just gotten outrageous. I think I had talked to you about someone proposing like just taking a one weekend and let's just put our guns, leave them in the dressers, don't pack them, don't carry them, don't do anything. One weekend we just go without hearing about 50 people being shot in Chicago, 13 murdered.
And I believe they tried to do it in Chicago.
Okay.
Of all things, I don't think it lasted. I think it lasted a couple of days, not too much longer after that.
And I don't know if there is an answer. I hate to think that we turn inner city urban areas into police states, and by putting a National Guard on every corner, a cop on every corner. We know some of the issues we have with law enforcement when they have to make a split decision about life or death in their mind. That split decision doesn't always favor black people when it's made. The conclusion a lot of times is that we end up being shot or dead, or shot or dead, and the cop is justifying what they're doing because in their mind they feel their life is in danger. It's very difficult for juries to convict cops, and as long as they say, I thought he was reaching for a gun, I thought I saw this, and I felt that my life was in danger if I didn't pull the trigger and put him down. But like I said, that split decision doesn't work in our favor. So I'd hate to put more cops into black areas, but I don't know if there's any other choice except to do something like that, a massive force to suppress the crime.
Yeah, and I think if we really pull the cover off this, Jimmy, it's not just black on black violence here, but we're really talking about the grotesquely high homicide rate of black men. Now, obviously, there are black women who are involved in this equation, but if we look at the majority of this black on black crime, it is typically black men killing other black men, not a bunch of black women killing black women.
True.
And so when we look at that, I mean, in and of it by itself, that if within any other community, in my community, would be a national issue in our country, except for it is black.
It's becoming a national issue because white crime is sort of creeping up also. But if it ever gets anywhere near our numbers, you're right. someone will declare a national situation at that point.
Exactly. And so, you know, when you consider the narrative over the last 100 years, you consider what has happened to the black male during the period of slavery.
Mm-hmm.
If you look at what happened during really most of the 20th century with the lynching of black men, especially during the early part of the 20th century, when you look at how the black man has been pulled from the black family
yes.
In several areas after the 60s, with, of course, what we've talked about before in terms of the government subsidizing,
yes.
Our households, and basically encouraging black women not to have black men in the household because that reduced how much money they got.
You incentivize not to have the man around, correct?
Right, and then you look at the over-incarceration of black men in our prisons. I mean, it looks almost like right out warfare on black men in America if you look at it like boiling a frog over the last couple of 100 years or so.
True, a lot of that is true, and I just don't know if there's an easy answer, a quick answer, or even a generational answer that can turn us around in the next generation or two. It may take several generations, but I think it's something that is certainly warrant of a conversation in our community to do something about it. So we can't just keep disguising and pretending that it doesn't exist, or get angry when people talk about it.
And I think that's the problem that we're dealing with. We have, I mean, it's clear to everyone in terms of what we've seen in the mass media or what we haven't seen, because what we're seeing in the mass media is just the tip of the iceberg of what's truly happening in most of our communities, and in particular in our black communities. Most folks have no idea of the abundance of black men in our prisons. I mean, we're what?
I wasn't aware until you told me one of the stats of how many black men are incarcerated in these prisons.
Because if you think about it, if we are as a collective body, what, 13 or 14%
yes.
of the national population, black men half of that. And so that would make us somewhere between 6%. But we are 40% of the prison system, which is somewhere between maybe 2.4 million people.
That's a lot of men to be incarcerated. I mean that's an army. We have about 2.5 million men and women in the military protecting the entire nation. And now we're saying we have almost 2.5 million black men in prison.
Well, not black men. I think there is an overall incarceration rate of about 2.3 to 2.4 million.
Okay.
40% of those being black men.
Okay.
So you're still talking about 1 million black men who are in prison.
That's a lot of men. Withering away in prisons, not being productive.
Not in their households.
Not in the household.
Not in the workforce.
Not in the workforce.
Not in the military.
Not in the military, and not raising their children,
right.
Not providing guidance, not providing any kind of leadership, and certainly not being there to help the black woman who's stuck raising the children by herself.
Right, absolutely. So, I mean, all that being said, this is a statistic of catastrophic proportion. Mm-hmm. It's not really, very few people are really talking about this. But you look at the impact that it's having on our communities. If you look at, honestly, the impact that it's having on America.
True.
I mean, again, when you look at the nature of creativity in every endeavor that we have, whether it's music, whether it's machinery, whether it's technology, whether it's music, entertainment, when you look at that brilliance that comes from our community historically, and you are taking that out of the mainstream, mm-hmm. and you're enclosing that unutilized talent.
Yes.
I mean, there in and of itself is a national catastrophe, in my opinion. So
you may have heard the music is starting to play, which means that it's time for us to start winding down. So let's give our shout outs to our sponsors, to Fitness 360 for allowing us to come here and shoot our show.
MOTC Telecom
for providing the equipment, and for Us Films, who does the film editing. And also want to do a shameful plug for our book club, Eyes of the Soul. You can find it at eyesofthesoul.com. We'll post a link up on the video. If you're in the DFW area, you're looking for a place to come and have some really, really great, meaningful discussion and dialogue, give us, check us out, and we'd love to have you come by and be our guest. With that being said, Tom, let's just, our subscribers. We need to
There you
thank
go,
our viewers
absolutely.
and
We want to thank our
subscribers.
subscribers just like you, man. Of course, invite your friends to come listen to us.
Yes, please. So, and thank you, and we'll see you, and we'll continue this conversation in part 2 of the show. Thank you very much.
Thank you.